While the youth of 1976 fought for education, young people in 2022 are fighting a different fight. They're fighting to be employed, for one. It's hard to celebrate this day without looking at the challenges that they currently face. The latest Breaking Barriers report by Harambee details how to combat this massive crisis facing our youth. In fact, Chief Engagement Officer at Harambee, Zengeziwe Msimang, joins us now to unpack that report. Zengeziwe, it's great to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming onto the program. I mean, when we think about the challenges facing the youth of 2022, it's a long list, isn't it? But certainly youth unemployment is possibly at the top of that list if we think about what Statistics South Africa had to say. 66.5% of young people without a job.
Without doubt, I think that the unemployment crisis, and it is a crisis, is definitely up there in terms of the challenges that young people are facing. I think the reality of the situation is that our economy is just not growing at a rate that is fast enough to really absorb young people. And what we need to be doing is looking at creative ways that we can get young people into employment, and young people also finding ways to sustain themselves and have sustainable livelihoods through micro enterprise, through SMMEs, and really just making sure that it's not just one option that we give them, but looking at different ways, because we need to get young people into jobs right now.
Yeah. Zengeziwe, we feel, and I'm sure you feel the same way, that we've been having this conversation in one form or another for many, many years. We've talked about youth unemployment being a ticking time bomb. I just wonder, from the research that you've conducted, have we made any inroads?
Yes, I think inroads have been made, without doubt. But I think it's really about the creativity we use to kind of shift the dial. It's about what is the trajectory of youth unemployment. And what we saw with the recent statistics, the QLFS that was recently released, was that there was an uptake in employed young people. So we are looking at 5.1 employed young people right now. And that's definitely not enough. But I think that work has started to be done. There's different programs where civil society, government, and business are really beginning to come together and say, as you're saying, we've been talking about this for a long time. What are the viable solutions? And I think there's technology that we've been using increasingly. SA Youth is a platform that we've developed that literally looks at what are the barriers that young people face in terms of entering the labor market. And I think at Harambee, that's really the core of our research, is understanding how do we reduce these barriers and how do we really pull the big levers to make sure that young people are able to get into places of employment. And I think looking at different ways in which young people can do that is really important. And if you look at the micro enterprise space, we have so many young people that are resilient. And we've heard time and time again, oh, young people are so resilient. They've managed to survive the COVID pandemic. They managed to survive through all of that economic loss that we had. But I think at Harambee, what we're saying is, that's great, but how do we take that resilience and double-click in the sectors where we found that resilience exists, and then really bolster those industries, bolster those environments. So if you look, for example, at micro enterprise, we've got young people who, during the COVID-19 pandemic, just began what we call hustling, and that is basically young women who became hairdressers in order to just survive. We had young men we found often become drivers. Small things that young people do to sustain themselves, and that at the end of the day we end up saying, oh, wow, they're so resilient. But what we're really saying is, how do we reduce the barriers in those areas? How do we give them business in a box? How do we give them assistance with marketing? How do we make that 400 Rand to 4,000 Rand that they earn through these micro enterprises into double that amount in the space of a month? So I think we definitely need to look at jobs, without doubt, but we also need to look at micro enterprise and SMMEs and how we really enable them to enter into these spaces more effectively.
In fact, Harambee's Breaking Barriers report talks a lot about resilience, right? It's a big theme in your report. Resilient outcomes, resilient sectors, enablers of resilience. And I think that last one, enablers of resilience, is an important one for me, if you think about what you've just outlined, how young people have been able to or have tried to bounce back from the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, they've had to be more resilient than young people who are from wealthier backgrounds, right? They need to be ridiculously resilient just to survive. So, knowing that and knowing that they have those raw skills of being resilient and bouncing back, are we taking that? And this doesn't just apply to government. It's the private sector as well. It's various other institutions. Are we taking it? Are we honing it? Are we supporting it?
Without doubt. I think there's a lot of work that's been done. I mean, if you look at the Department of Trade and Competition, they've developed a master plan, which is not looking just at resilience, broadly, but looking at the actual sectors where we see it. For example, the global business services sector has the potential, if the correct levers are really pulled down, to create 775,000 jobs by 2030. And I think what we're trying to say here is, let's not just leave young people at resilience. Oh, you managed to survive through this. Let's make them thrive, and let's do that by looking at various industries. We know that the financial services sector, for example, is a place where young people have been able to bounce back. These are sectors in which that are closer to pre-pandemic levels than any other sector that we know of in South Africa right now. So what we're trying to do at Harambee and what we're trying to do with our partners in civil society as well as in government is to look at these sectors and say, how do we not just create jobs in these sectors, but sustain them as well? And I think even with the government theme this year, everybody is definitely talking about resilience, and we really want to make sure that it's not just talk, really, and we're able to say, these are the sunrise sectors, this is in agriculture, this is the potential for jobs, and this is how we then begin to make sure that they're created.
Yeah. That really is the crux of it, isn't it? Because we've been talking about these issues for so long that it's not just talk. Let me thank you for your time this morning. Zengeziwe Msimang is the Chief Engagement Officer at Harambee. Unemployment is one of the big issues we're focusing on for you on this Youth Day.